Good evening, dear listener. Good evening, one and all. Today, we're going to discuss something near and dear to myself and the United Kingdom. Today, we are going to have a chat about tea. Yes, tea. I'll give you a moment to calm your erections and change your pants. Tea. Tea is a beverage over which war has been fought, empires risen and fallen, and governments smited. Tea is segregated into 5 styles: white, green, oolong, black, and pu'er. Go ahead, giggle, I said pu'er. This morning, I cupped a hand over my delicate anus and got a handful of pu'er. It was light and aromatic, like the finest cup of tea, and I grinned a flashy, schoolyard grin as I admired the bouquet. The differences in these 5 styles all come down to when the leaves are harvested and how they are subsequently processed, and I cringe when I use such a crude and graceless term. The leaves undergo 5 steps. They are plucked, withered, rolled, oxidized, and fired. But not all styles are subjected to every step. Oh no! None of these styles should be confused with tisanes or herbal teas that contain not even one leaf from a tea tree. Herbal tea is simply not tea. Fight. White tea is the most unadulterated, the most subtle of all styles. Only the 2 youngest, most virgin buds are plucked from the tree. Those buds are often coated in a fine, silvery down, finer than the pubic fuzz on my prom date. It is a style that was once only reserved for the emperors of China and Japan, and sometimes tasted by their most virgin of concubines to prepare them for their nightly duties. Don't fact-check me on that. It is a scarce and more expensive variety of tea, despite how simple its production is. After harvesting, the buds are spread out and withered. If it was a particularly wet day, they are subjected to a gentle heat to aid in the process. The flavor profile can be described as grassy or vaginal. Vegetal. The leaves can be used to steep 2, maybe even 3 cups. Each run will unlock a different flavor profile as the tannins are coaxed from within the depths of the leaf. A high-quality cup of white tea is truly something to behold with an appropriate level of love and sincere appreciation. A perfect cup of white tea is unassuming, but it will whisper to your soul, "You are everything." Green tea is a ubiquitous style that we should all be familiar with. It's often an abused term for an abused leaf that fits the technical requirements of green tea. Hell, you can even find a Monster energy drink marketed as green tea, but it ruins the spirit of the drink. True green tea types vary wildly, and it all depends on the steps taken during the harvest, rolling, and firing. Green tea can be thought of as a perfectly cooked vegetable, a brightly blanched broccoli rabe. The leaves are plucked, withered, and rolled, and then fired just enough to preserve the bright green chlorophyll without denaturing the product. Think of it as hitting a perfect medium rare on a piece of human flank steak. There is little better. Some green teas, most notably Gyokuro tea, are forced to produce even more chlorophyll before harvest by shading the trees with bamboo or straw mats to choke them off from their precious food source. It is the wonderfully dangerous ball of fire that orbits our very, very flat planet. This reduction in light causes the leaves to darken and become richer, full of manly Kate Moss confidence. The final product is a tea that is most unbelievably like a cup of grass clippings. This awful flavor, of course, means you'll be taking out a second mortgage on your trailer to appreciate what few people enjoy. Perfection. Oolong tea falls somewhere between green and black teas on the oxidation scale. Oolong translates to black dragon. The name comes from the legend of a tea maker who was scared away from tending to his freshly harvested crop by a rat-dicked black dragon who really was just lonely and estranged from his kind and looking to make a new friend. The tea was unattended for too long. It became over-oxidized and overly delicious. This new style was named for its tormentor. Another, less fantastical theory is that the rolled-up mature leaves resemble a black dragon. I believe the former. Oolong is one of the more demanding styles to make, involving complex hand-rolling and oxidation to yield a beautiful, coppery libation. The mature leaves will unfurl as they steep, and feel free, dear listener, to steep the same leaves as many as 4 times. You won't be disappointed. Black tea is by far the most common style. Around 90% of all tea sold in the US is black tea, usually in the form of iced tea that comes from a dusty old tea bag off a supermarket shelf. The leaves are subjected to all 5 steps, including an intensive oxidation process that yields a rich cup of deep amber liquid. What the rest of the world knows as black tea is known in China as red tea, referring to the ruddy reddish color of the brew. The discrepancy can be traced back to a simple error in translation, but the mistake has held fast throughout history. This is not to be confused with the South African rooibos herbal tea that is colloquially called red tea. To add to the confusion, if one were to walk into a tea parlor in suburban Britannia and request a cup of black tea, they would assume you wanted tea with no milk. Those tricksy Brits. After black tea has been fully processed, it is then sorted and graded for uniformity. Otherwise, the flavor profile would be drastically different from cup to cup due to differently sized leaves, the amount of surface area exposed, and the rate at which the delightfully flavorful bits are extracted. Black teas can exude many rich flavors, some described as malty, nutty, flowery, and even spicy. Lastly, dear listener, there is pu'er, the most comically named of all teas. This tea is quite different in processing, storage, and taste from any other tea on earth. Because of its rarity and unique characteristics, pu'ers have a connoisseur following like few other teas. Here, we'll attempt to demystify this most unusual tea. It is the only tea that is fermented, despite the terms fermentation and oxidation often being used interchangeably in the tea trade. Pu'er falls into one of 2 categories, raw and ripened pu'er. Raw pu'er is processed similarly to green tea and is often pressed into shapes much like a bird's nest. This tea is carefully stored and aged for several years. The longer the aging process, the more refined and flavorful the resulting tea will be. That rhymed. Some pu'ers are aged for 20 years or even longer. The younger the tea, the more astringent the flavor. The older, more mature varieties are quite mild and satisfying, much like the stories from a wizened bookkeeper. Ripened pu'er undergoes a faster, deeper, faster, deeper, faster, deeper aging process. It involves the addition of moisture to encourage fermentation. This only takes around 3 months and is therefore a less expensive product than its raw counterpart. Once finished, the dark tea can taste like a raw pu'er, that has been aged for as long as 20 years, but not exactly the same. Deep down, you'll know that you could have blown the extra dough for bragging rights about your $100 cup of tea that you really don't enjoy anyhow. Your personality lacks any complexity, my friend. The flavor of a fine pu'er can be described as earthy, woodsy even, like a damp forest after a warm rain, full of flavors reminiscent of mushrooms, leather, and hay. It's as if you've distilled a musty antique shop into liquid form. And so, dear listener, here we must part ways, for my cup of Earl Grey has run dry, my tongue is parched, and I am thinking of what to imbibe in next. Perhaps I'll prepare another cup. Perhaps just some straight vodka. Perhaps you'll join me next time for whatever subject may tickle my toes next.